Hey guys, what's up? Let's see. So, you know, we have a lot of fun here, right? Going through lawsuits and explaining and distilling the legal language of these things into something a little more digestible. And that's great. And I love being able to go through that and to kind of help people figure out what's going on, right? Like I like that. It's a great part of this, and I'm glad my show has basically become a lot of that. However, there are other legal issues out there than just these lawsuits, and they are extremely complicated and often misreported, misunderstood, misrelayed, miscommunicated. And this is a great opportunity to go ahead and address one of them. So I'm perusing on my phone, killing some time earlier today, and I come across this article from the New York Times opinion section, and it's by a guy named David Leonhardt, who you may know or not, as a guy who writes for the New York Times. I don't know how to finish that sentence. It doesn't really matter, right? So David Leonhardt has written this opinion piece about Donald Trump and the realities of impeachment. Real quick, let's get to the thrust of where his argument starts and what it is, and then let's go through it, right? And Lawsplain away, and figure out if he's on the mark or not. And we're gonna do it in a great way. I'm gonna use two things. I'm going to use two sources. One source are the articles of impeachment brought against Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton. And the reason I'm going to use those is because this guy brings them up. And two, I'm going to go ahead and use something that just seems absent from all of this talk about impeachment and obstruction of justice. And that's the federal statute on obstruction of justice, which you'd think would be like paramount in all of these conversations. Like one of these news stories would talk about what the actual standards for obstruction of justice are, or even just what the words say. Because I mean, if you watch my channel, there's a statute on the page, right, and it has a plain text meaning, and then sometimes there's some application to that statute. And in this video, to keep it like under 28 million hours, I'm just going to go through the plain text of the statute on obstruction of justice, specifically with criminal investigations, obstructing a criminal investigation, because that is the most relevant one. And if you feel like I'm concealing something from you on those statutes, you can go to Bing or Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever and type in U.S. Code obstruction of justice, and it'll bring you to the chapter. If you click on like the Cornell Law Law link, it'll bring you to the chapter with all the little sub-chapters on obstruction of justice, and you can kind of take a look at those. Just read the subheadings and see if any of them sound like what they're talking about Trump is doing, and you can go through and see if you can find something different. You may find something I didn't find. And when I say, let me be clear, when I say that the talk about the actual language of the statute seems to be absent from publications, I am by no means giving a complete review of all of the of all of the publications that are out there. I am by no means a comprehensive news hound. So if you find some, post them in the comments. Like, that's cool. I'd love to read them. I haven't seen them, and they may be out there. And if they are, props to those journalists. I'd be interested to see what they say. But let's start here. So he wants to get past the realities of the process of impeachment, right? Impeachment articles have to be introduced in the House of Representatives, and then they have to be tried in the Senate. In a Republican House and a Republican Senate with a Republican sitting president, you're probably not going to have an impeachment. And that's where a lot of these discussions break down. And he fairly says, let's go ahead and get past that. Let's move past this initial discussion killer, and let's theory craft this and just like look at it kind of outside of that. Are the nuts and bolts there to do an impeachment? So the actual line is here. Is serious consideration of impeachment fair? I think the answer is yes. So that's the reference we need to start with. And I don't usually like do this, and this is not in any way to discredit the argument of this other person. So I'm not appealing to authority here, but I want to point something out about Mr. Leonhardt. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it says here at the bottom. Oh, you know what? It doesn't say it in the printed article. It only says it in the actual article. But Mr. Leonhardt is not a lawyer, and that's okay. That does not invalidate his opinion in any way. It does not preclude him from commenting on the subject. Mr. Leonhardt has a Bachelor of Science degree from Yale University in Applied Mathematics. I'm sure he's a very smart guy and very good at applying mathematics to things. He writes extensively on economic issues, and I have no reason to doubt his credentials on those subjects. I will say up front that in this article, he has given me a couple reasons to doubt his credentials on legal subjects, and we're going to go through why. That's good stuff, man. Okay, sorry. I'm really enjoying this Hibiki whiskey that was recommended. Anyway, so let's go through this in the way that I want to do. I hope you guys don't hate this, but we're going to just go through the article, and we're going to figure out what this guy's trying to say, and if he's smart or if he's a dummy. I want to quickly allude to, and I don't do anything quick, I'm sorry, but I want to quickly allude to an article that I read somewhere by Michael Crichton. Yeah, the Jurassic Park guy. And he talked about this effect, and I don't remember what the effect is called, and in my true, genuine fashion, I'm not going to go look it up. You can find this article if you just like type in Michael Crichton newspapers wrong or whatever. But as he was reading through newspapers, he noticed something. He would read an article, he'd say, "Oh, okay, that's fine," about whatever subject, and then he'd get to an article about the entertainment industry, and he'd read it, and he'd say, "They're wrong on the basics. Like they have the perspective wrong. They don't seem like they know the industry, and this is my industry, so I know it really well, and they're wrong." And he'd say this article is complete rubbish or garbage, or if you're in the UK or the US, it's terrible. And then he'd move on and read the next article, and he'd say, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And then he started to think about it. Wait a minute, if they don't get my industry correct, why do I automatically assume they get other industries correct? And that's kind of an interesting little hint, I guess, at how this article goes. The problem is that people who write professionally, especially for a publication like the New York Times, are good, even in an opinion piece, at making issues sound like they're a thing that's real, that has happened. So let's, with that sort of preface, and I'm giving it away. Let me, one important thing for a video like this. let me get my biases out there. I have no preference for Donald Trump. I've said in other videos I did not vote for Donald Trump. I probably wouldn't vote for Donald Trump today. I also did not vote for Hillary Clinton and would not vote for her ever. Probably no matter what. I lean to the right, but I'm pretty libertarian in a lot of ways. Not as like a doctrinal ethos, but just as a frame of reference. So, Trump has some issues that worried me and made me unable to vote for him based on those. That said, since he's been elected, I don't have any reason to throw him out of office. I don't think he's doing a particularly bad or a particularly great job. Some days I'm impressed, other days I'm not. This is all just going to say, I don't have a vested interest in Trump on this. However, I am curious from an academic standpoint about the extent of executive authority and how we have shaped and changed executive authority. When we look back to people like FDR, we look back to people like Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, and then we look back over the past 20 and 30 years, like have we been shirking or have we allowed the executive to shirk its executive authority? And do we expect that to continue? Obviously we weren't appointing a king, but I think Dan Carlin mentioned on Common Sense, his podcast, which is pretty decent. He said, sometimes the American system looks like a new form of government where it's a dictatorship, but the dictator is actually rotated out every 4 to 8 years. And I think it's a little hyperbolic, but in a lot of ways, our country has historically resembled this. Presidents are limited in power, except when they need to be unlimited in power. Think Lincoln. Like Lincoln's actions in wartime, largely of questionable constitutional merit. Now, we give him a pass because he was doing it for the good of the Union, for the, ostensibly for freeing the slaves. Although I wouldn't say he was doing it for freeing the slaves. That's a beneficial result that occurred. But, we can look back to Andrew Jackson openly swinging his executive authority around like he owned the joint, right? FDR pressured the courts in massive ways, using his public popularity to really put pressure on the court to hold up some really horrific and unconstitutional things, like incarcerating Japanese people because they're Japanese. Actually, of Japanese origin, American citizens because of their Japanese origins, and taking their land and giving it to white people. Like, these are things that happened from presidential strongmen, and whether you think their actions are justified or not, and there are some really good arguments for what, apologistic arguments for FDR's position on the Japanese in World War II. I wasn't the president then. I don't have to make that choice. I get to armchair it, 70 years later. But, there are arguments strongly in support of that. But that's not the point. The point is we took people based on their race and put them in camps. And most people would think that is an impermissible exercise of executive power, but the courts disagreed. And that Korematsu is the case, and it is still good law. And if we were actually at war with, say, Morocco, I don't know why. It seems quick, but Morocco rises to superpowerhood and starts a war, and we're at war with Morocco. If there's a community of Moroccan Americans somewhere, there would, and they're near like a military installation or power plants or, some integral part of the power grid, there would be precedent for a president to round up all the Moroccan Americans, take their land away and put them in camps. Like that's in the books because of a guy like FDR. So we have this weird back and forth history of presidential strongmen and then presidential softies. And that doesn't mean that the president doesn't have the power just because we haven't seen these powers executed in the past 2 decades. It doesn't mean he has them either, okay? But my point in all this is if we're, if we're judging presidents on a curve, right? If we're rating them on a curve or judging their actions of constitutionality on a curve, we've got inherent problems. Because the curve is going to change, but the morality or the constitutionality of these actions may not. So, anyway, all of that to kind of lay out my biases here. I have an academic interest in presidential authority. I said before, I'm a libertarian. I am skeptical of state authority of any kind. So it's not like I'm in favor of some authoritarian regime. But I do find it interesting when we get a president like Trump who has the potential to exert, and the rhetoric, supporting more authoritarian tendencies. So I'm curious kind of the limits of that. I don't really want to see them all executed because it means losing freedom. But if they're going to be executed, I want to see where they go and how far they go. All right. So I have sufficiently wasted a ton of time on this intro. And I apologize for spending your time, but thank you for humoring me on it. And let's dig into this. There are good reasons to be wary of impeachment talk. Congressional Republicans show zero interest, and they're the ones in charge. Democrats, for their part, need to focus on retaking Congress, and railing about impeachment probably won't help them win votes. But let's set aside real politics for a few minutes and ask a different question. Is serious consideration of impeachment fair? I think the answer is yes. Why is that? The evidence is now quite strong. Okay, we're already on shaky ground. The evidence is now quite strong that Donald Trump committed obstruction of justice. Is it? I don't know. Let's see how he justifies this. Many legal scholars believe a sitting president cannot be charged with a crime. Yeah, that's a... I don't know if that's a fair take, but I think many legal scholars would believe a sitting president cannot be charged with the crime of obstruction of justice. I think something like murder, robbery, these things are a little more practical. You know, obvious crimes against a person. But obstruction of justice runs kind of parallel with the power to pardon. And the power to pardon is massive and much stronger than we give it credit. We think of the power of the pardon when we think of a president, like at the end of his term, freeing 200 people, in some sort of symbolic gesture, as if like that's the limit of the power of the pardon, or you know, some person in a really bad situation, like maybe they're on death row, and there's lots to suggest that maybe they didn't do it, but they've expired all of their appeals, and there were some problems, you know. Then the president steps in, or a governor steps in and pardons this individual for their crimes. Like those are things that can happen. That's kind of how we associate the power of the pardon. But the power of the pardon actually consists of other things like clemency. Clemency does not actually require a charge to pardon someone. Like, for example, if Trump were to order someone to cease the investigation of an individual, that might actually be an exercise of the power of clemency. And I think it's clemency. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm dumb. That's cool. But I'm pretty sure it's clemency. So, you know, it's a preemptive pardon. No charges are done. But, you know, the president of the United States may indicate that, you know, you need to leave this person alone. And even if you were to go ahead and file charges, I would pardon them. But it doesn't have to be expressly so. So, you know, obstruction of justice, in the context of the President of the United States, obstruction and pardoning run parallel, like a pardon of someone necessarily obstructs the flow of justice. It must, by definition, obstruct justice from the plain language meaning of the words, right? So, that's where a sitting president maybe cannot be charged with the crime of obstruction of justice. So the proper remedy for a president credibly accused of obstructing justice is impeachment. And yeah, that's because impeachment is what we call a political remedy. It's based ostensibly on something called high crimes and misdemeanors, but there isn't necessarily a legal requirement. Oh, excuse me. Good Lord. There is not necessarily a legal definition of high crimes and misdemeanors in the context of impeachment. It's a weird phrase because, it's just, we have misdemeanors, and misdemeanors are typically very small crimes, like a small property crime or something like that. Petty theft would be a misdemeanor. Shoplifting, depending on the value of the goods, a misdemeanor. So, like, if the president pilfers a pack of gum from a 7-Eleven, do you impeach the president? Like, is that what happens? And maybe you do. Maybe you do. I don't want my president stealing gum, right? But the idea that, like, a misdemeanor, like, for example, okay, I got one. Let's say there's a wetland on your property and you dump some dirt into it, and then they catch you and they tell you to remove it, and you say, "Screw you, this is my land." You're guilty of a misdemeanor if you fail to comply with the wetland restoration order, at least in the state of Minnesota. So, is that grounds? Like, the president fails to comply with a wetland restoration order at his property not in Washington, D.C.? Do we impeach him for that? Because that's a misdemeanor. High crimes tends to involve murder. And I think if a president murdered someone, we'd probably impeach them. Although there's a good argument that Obama murdered some American citizens using a drone, when he specifically said, fire a missile at them when they were in Yemen. I don't know. Some people think that. Others don't. Sorry, I'm rambling. But yes, the proper remedy for a president credibly accused of just about anything is impeachment. Because if you need the president out of office for his actions, impeachment is really the way to go. The first article of impeachment against Richard Nixon argued that he had, quote, prevented, obstructed, and impeded the administration of justice, end quote, as if that were the whole story. One of the two impeachment articles that the House passed against President Bill Clinton used that identical phrase. Well, that's interesting. In both cases, now this is where the Crichton effect is what I'm going to call it, even though he calls it something else, comes into play. And this is where I'm a mathematician and not a lawyer becomes kind of apparent, in a funny way. In both cases, the article then laid out the evidence with a numbered list. Nixon's version had 9 items, Clinton's had 7. Each list was meant to show that the president had intentionally tried to subvert a federal investigation. Yeah, but like the numbers of things on a list aren't relevant, because if your obstruction of justice claim is 1 item, the president shot the director of the FBI in the head when he was investigating it, that's way more important than 100 items that are lesser than that. Having a bunch of investigators commit suicide by bullets to the back of the head or something. That would be like a much more relevant, just having a numbers of a list doesn't matter. Interestingly, Nixon was not impeached. They had voted in the Judiciary Committee for impeachment, but it had not gone to the full House. So, in a weird way, Nixon's version had 9 items, except Nixon wasn't formally impeached. Clinton's had 7, and he was. Now, he beat the impeachment charges as well. We would assume that Nixon would not, but is it merely the number of items, as is focused on by the mathematician here? Given last week's news, that Trump has already tried to fire Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating the Trump campaign. And by the way, I don't think it's a good idea to fire the special counsel who's investigating you or your affiliates. But it is within the president's power as the executive authority to fire any member of the executive branch. It is. They can do that. Like, that's an okay thing. It's a direct subordinate. Now, are there limits on the firing? Maybe. Like, if the firing is improper, without cause, or for a nefarious cause, those types of things, they kind of run into like a pseudo-employment lawsuit. Right? Does the president have the power to fire this person? The president has had for a long time a good argument for firing Mueller. Mueller potentially has impermissible ties to Director Comey, who's a material witness to the investigation. And that potential, I don't know, okay? Like, I'm not saying that he definitely is ethically out of bounds here, but he may be. And if the president, as the CEO of America, of the executive branch of America, decides to fire a high-ranking official of the corporation that is the executive branch of America, he can do that. It's within his purview. It's bad PR. It doesn't necessarily end the investigation. They may have to appoint a new special counsel to replace the old special counsel. However, it is within the authority of the President of the United States to fire Robert Mueller, however you say it, it doesn't matter. It is within his power. Okay? Let's get that clear. It's time to put together the same sort of list for Trump. Remember that he says the same sort of list, because we're going to go through them one point at a time and see point by point if this is the same sort of list. And judging by my cackles and giggles, I'm guessing you can figure out where we fall on that spectrum. Of course, this list is based only on publicly available information. Mueller, no doubt, knows more. Why is there no doubt? Why is there no doubt? There are no charges filed, so there's actually a lot of doubt that he knows any more. We get trickles of information over, let's see, he has had, let's take a pause here. He has had cooperation from Papadopoulos for almost a year now. He has had cooperation from other Trump campaign officials. He has had, cooperation from Flynn himself, right? For months. We don't have any more information about how the President Trump's obstruction of justice for Russian collusion. We have really no idea how much Mueller has. It seems to be that Mueller doesn't have that much. After this long of investigating, he doesn't seem to have that much. He may be playing his cards close to his chest. Hard to say. But we have not seen a lot of news on this story, so I think saying Mueller no doubt knows more is a bit of a stretch. And I was upfront about my biases. David has not been upfront about his, but this indicates where those biases may be. Okay, so now I'm going to do this thing where we go through the articles one point at a time, and we're going to go to their list. I am going to, oh, excuse me. Here we go. I'm going to read the statements before the list of each of these things, but I'm not going to read the whole statement, okay? So here we go. Richard Nixon, using the powers of his high office, engaged, I'm here, by the way, personally and through his close subordinates and agents, in a course of conduct or plan designed to delay, impede, and obstruct the investigation of such illegal entry into the Watergate Hotel, to cover up, conceal, and protect those responsible, and to conceal the existence and scope of other unlawful covert activities. So right away, we have a difference. The Watergate Hotel was a break-in, a burglary of physical property for the purpose of gaining intelligence illegally through theft on the opposition. Okay? This is important because this frames what Nixon was being impeached for. Let's go to the Clinton impeachment. Article 3. Here we go. Bill Clinton has prevented, obstructed, and impeded the administration of justice, and has to that end engaged personally and through his subordinates and agents in a course of conduct or scheme designed to delay, impede, cover up, and conceal the existence of evidence and testimony related to a federal civil rights action brought against him in a duly instituted judicial proceeding. President Clinton was not impeached for a physical burglary, right? What President Clinton was impeached for was, as we'll see, inducing false testimony from witnesses and corrupting a civil trial against him. A civil trial. Watergate's a criminal act. Clinton impeachment is a civil trial. Trump, we don't know. We don't know what collusion with Russia actually is as far as civil or criminal, because collusion with Russia to win a presidential election doesn't really fall within the purview of anything. Potentially, the real possibility here is a violation of federal election, campaign finance laws, right? Basically, taking information from the Russians or directing them to provide material support for the campaign outside of federal election law. That's kind of where it is. But collusion in the election is this weird, nebulously identified thing, and people they're frankly afraid to lay out what it is, because there is not a law that says a president and his campaign can't talk to a foreign government about an election. Yeah, I mean, I guess their argument may be that they're inducing a foreign government to commit crimes that would benefit them. That may be true. It's hard to say. And it's hard to say a lot of this because we don't actually have Mueller's notes, and neither does this guy, and I think neither does Mueller, right? They're looking for evidence of a crime, not a specific crime. They're looking for evidence of crime because they don't actually know what crime has been committed at this point. If a crime has been committed, they're looking for evidence. So that's kind of an important point to get out at the onset here. We have a nebulously potential criminal activity, but we don't know what it would be. Here we have a burglary that was used to steal research on the opposing party in a presidential election. And here we have a civil action, not a criminal action, in which the president is alleged to have interfered in that civil action for his own benefit. Very different starts, but remember, the same sort of list. Okay? And I mean, I have to focus on this because if you are, let's say, you're making a legal argument, and this doesn't work because, you're not going in front of a court. You're going in front of Congress to do impeachment. But were Trump a normal person and we were trying to come up with an analog here, and I'm going to cite precedent, and I cite Nixon and I cite Clinton, those initial differences are going to make a huge difference on the argument that comes out of the subsequent lists. So this is how attorneying works. And again, if we're completely ignoring the realities of what Congress's role in impeachment is, and we're just saying, is there sufficient evidence for something amounting to high crimes and misdemeanors which would allow an impeachment charge to be brought in the first place, then we have to immediately cast a little bit of shade on each of these two-sided authorities because they're relating to completely different events. Okay, so anyway, now we're going to go, we've got all that preface out of the way. We're going to go statement 1, statement 1, statement 1, statement 2, 2, 2, and so on and so on and so on. And we're going to see if these statements are of the same character as they are in the other suits. Okay, so 1. During a dinner at the White House on January 27, 2017, Trump asked for a pledge of loyalty, in quotes. I guess they mean not loyalty. A pledge of loyalty from James Comey, then the FBI director who was overseeing the investigation of the Trump campaign. Okay. Watergate articles. Number 1. Making false or misleading statements to lawfully authorized investigative officers and employees of the United States. Those are not the same. Number 1 of Clinton. William Jefferson Clinton corruptly encouraged a witness in a federal civil rights action brought against him to execute a sworn affidavit in that proceeding that he knew to be perjurious, false, and misleading. Okay, let's analyze one statement at a time. Asking for loyalty from a subordinate who is appointed by a previous and hostile administration is not a crime in any capacity, in any way. For like, think about the lunacy of this. For a direct supervisor, and the direct supervisor, the boss, to go to a subordinate and say, the previous boss hired you. I need to know if you're going to be loyal to me. I want you to pledge to be loyal to me as I am the executive of the legal requirements of the United States. I need you to faithfully execute the laws of the land. I need you to be loyal to what I say in driving policy, in enforcing law. I mean, we're talking about Comey, who under Obama was ordered to ignore federal law on sanctuary cities. He was ordered to ignore federal law on the Controlled Substances Act in states that have legalized marijuana, which is still illegal under federal law, and federal law wins under the Supremacy Clause. Like, listen to what has happened here. We have a new boss coming in with an upper manager hired by the old boss, and he says, I need a pledge of loyalty from you. That is absolutely reasonable. You can say that Trump is trying to do something or influence Comey, but we don't have any evidence that that's what he's trying to do here. And if Comey is uncomfortable providing loyalty in any function, then he should step down and resign immediately. That should immediately happen. If he's unwilling to make the pledge of loyalty that his superior is asking for, he should step down, because it's not the FBI director's job to investigate the president. They're not the proper vehicle to do it. A special investigator or special counsel is the proper vehicle. Used to be an, whatchamacallit? Oh, I can't even think about it. Ken Starr, an independent counsel, Ken Starr, investigated Bill Clinton, right? And then, after recommending impeachment, the Democrats changed the rules and changed it to a special counsel or special prosecutor. So, reap what you sow, I guess. But nevertheless, it is not the FBI director's job to investigate his direct superior, because he has to report to that direct superior about the ongoing law enforcement efforts. So it is absolutely reasonable for Trump to ask for loyalty from Comey because of the situation that they're in. Trump is recently inaugurated. Comey is an integral part of the Trump administration's primary role, which is the faithful execution of laws of the United States under the Constitution. If Comey is unwilling to cooperate, he should be fired, just like his attorney general, the previous attorney general, when Donald Trump asked them to issue a particular executive order, and the attorney general of the United States, Donald Trump's direct inferior, said no. And he fired her, as he should, as any president should, when their direct report says no. That is insubordinate to your employer. You should be fired unless you're being retaliated against for reporting a violation of law, which did not happen in these cases. She had a different opinion. It was the FBI director, Yates, Sally Yates, I think. I might be wrong on that because I'm drinking. Whoever it was, she had a direct responsibility to faithfully enact the president's policies. If you can't do it, you resign. You resign. That's your role in that job. Anyway, these won't all be this long. Sorry. Number 2, February 14th, Trump directed several other officials to leave the Oval Office so he could speak privately with Comey. He then told Comey to let this go, referring to the investigation of Michael Flynn, who had resigned the previous day as Trump's national security advisor. Number 2, President Nixon was withholding relevant and material evidence or information from lawfully authorized investigative officers and employees of the United States. Clinton encouraged a witness in a federal civil rights action brought against him to give perjurious, false, and misleading testimony if and when called to testify personally in that proceeding. Okay, so we have, you guys clear the room. I'm going to talk to this guy, and I'm going to say, let it go. As my employee, and as someone who, as part of his job, must faithfully execute my law enforcement prerogatives, I tell him to let it go on Michael Flynn. That is within, you can disagree with the wisdom of the action. You can say that this is bad optics. It is bad optics. He should have fired Michael Flynn immediately upon taking office. Boom, done, you're out. I need a new guy. I need my guy in. He should have done that, but he didn't. Comey, not Flynn. He should have fired Comey immediately upon entering office. Like I said, you're out, my guy, whatever. However, as Donald Trump's direct report, he has an obligation to faithfully execute the law enforcement directives of the executive branch. That's Comey's job as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to do that to the limits of his jurisdiction. When a president orders a senior law enforcement officer to let it go, they kind of have to. Like, and that's ugly, right? And there may be other officers who don't have to let it go. But telling Comey to let it go, you may not like it, but it's probably within the president's power to do so. Notice here, withholding evidence from investigators who are authorized under law to do the investigation. That's a big difference between telling a direct inferior to let something go or to change their course of action in their employment. And Clinton, again, tampering with a witness directly. Telling them to commit perjury. Okay, number 3. March 22nd. Trump directed several other officials to leave a White House briefing so he could speak privately with Daniel Coates, the director of national intelligence, and Michael Pompeo, the CIA director. Trump asked him to persuade Comey to back off investigating Flynn. That is okay, by the way. That's an okay thing to do. Again, these are direct reports of Donald Trump. He can ask them to use that influence over Flynn or over Comey without actually obstructing justice in any way. Trump can fire every one of these guys at the drop of a hat. He can just fire them and appoint his own people. Okay, number 3, Watergate. Approving, condoning, acquiescing in, and counseling witnesses with respect to the giving of false or misleading statements to lawfully authorized investigative officers. Again, he's directing people, like Bill Clinton was doing, directing people to perjure themselves and commit a crime. Investigative officers, employees of the United States, and false or misleading testimony in duly instituted judicial and congressional proceedings. This is telling someone to commit a crime. The other thing is not. Clinton, number 3, encouraged or supported a scheme to conceal evidence that had been subpoenaed in federal civil rights action brought against him. Resisting a subpoena is contempt of court, which is a criminal act. Presidents are subject to subpoenas outside of the limits of national security interests, which are broad, by the way, although not too broad. Thanks, Nixon, for helping us sort that out. Number 4. In March and April, Trump told Comey in phone calls that he wanted Comey to lift the cloud of the investigation. What is that? That is certainly not a crime, like lifting the cloud of the investigation. I want this investigation thing that you're kind of doing, I want it gone because it's interfering with my ability to act in my capacity as president, because no one will shut up about it. So please lift the cloud of it. Tell people it's over. Make it over. Get it done. This should be done. Sorry. 4. Interfering or endeavoring to interfere with the conduct of investigations by the Department of Justice of the United States, the FBI, the Office of Watergate Special Prosecution Force, and the congressional committees. Interfering with an investigation is different from firing people who are your subordinates. Okay? Or giving your subordinates directive. Interfering with the conduct of investigations is, gosh, it's difficult to know what exactly they mean here. But like concealing evidence, tampering with witnesses, that type of stuff. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to move on. I'll rant on this for days if I don't. Bill Clinton intensified and succeeded in an effort to secure job assistance to a witness in a federal civil rights action brought against him in order to corruptly prevent the truthful testimony of that witness in that proceeding at a time when the truthful testimony of that witness would have been harmful to him. Blackmail. Or not blackmail, but bribery. Like, he's using his the office of the president to get job assistance, to force job assistance for this person in exchange for perjury testimony. Massively different than asking your subordinate to stop doing something. May 9th, Trump fired Comey as FBI director. 5 months too late, 4.5. On May 10th, Trump told Russian officials that the firing had taken off the great pressure of the Russia investigation. On May 11th, he told NBC News that the firing was because of this Russia thing. Absolutely. It's not Comey's job to do it. Special prosecutor, special counsel, that's the person who does it. Number 5. Approving, condoning, and acquiescing in the surreptitious payments of substantial sums of money for the purpose of obtaining the silence or influencing the testimony of witnesses, potential witnesses, or individuals who participated in such unlawful entry or other illegal activities. Folks, one is an employment decision, one is completely illegal. Bribing people for favorable testimony or for lying under oath is not legal. Oh, gosh. Bill Clinton corruptly allowed his attorney to make false and misleading statements to a federal judge characterizing an affidavit in order to prevent questioning deemed relevant by the judge. Such false and misleading statements were subsequently acknowledged by his attorney in a communication to that judge. Now, this is a little bit interesting because we don't know from this if the attorney was making knowingly false and misleading statements, or if the attorney was making false and misleading statements and that Bill Clinton had an obligation to correct those false and misleading statements with appropriate information. Either way, lying to the court is illegal. Number 6. Shortly after hearing that the Justice Department had appointed Mueller to take over the Russian investigation. Trump berated Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. The appointment had caused the administration again to lose control over the investigation. Trump accused Sessions of disloyalty. So what? So what? An executive berating a subordinate is not illegal, especially if it's for what they perceive as incompetence or disloyalty. Trump can fire Sessions at any time. Ugh. Okay. Number 6. Endeavoring to misuse the Central Intelligence Agency, an agency of the United States. This is tough because we don't know what misusing the CIA looks like. We know that Nixon is also accused of misusing the IRS to target his political enemies. It's potentially he's trying to use the CIA to either cover up the Watergate scandal or to maybe provide an alternative and false narrative. Not quite sure. Misusing the Central Intelligence Agency may not be a criminal act. I'm not sure. Again, it really depends on what that misuse is. Certainly, we don't want presidents misusing the CIA, although they probably do that with frequency. But it's hard to say just from that statement what that means. Okay, so Clinton related a false and misleading account of events relevant to a federal civil rights action brought against him to a potential witness in that proceeding in order to corruptly influence the testimony of that witness. So, he told a witness a lie about the events in order to influence that witness. That borders on being legal. It's completely unethical. But what specific crime that would be, I mean, other than just witness tampering, which would be obstruction of justice, I guess, so which we'll get to in just a minute. That it's there, but if you'll notice in the Watergate and the Clinton articles, we're starting to get to the end of the lists. We're starting to get the weaker and weaker claims, less obviously illegal. In June, Trump explored several options to retake control. At one point, he ordered the firing of Mueller before the White House counsel resisted. Okay, he can fire Mueller. I've covered this. The special prosecutor can be fired by the President of the United States. It is not a good idea to do so. I would not recommend it. It looks really bad. But it's not illegal, and it is not obstruction of justice. The end of the special prosecutor does not necessitate the end of the investigation, by the way. I'll say that again. I said it earlier because it's true. If he fires a special counsel, Congress can hire another one. If he fires that one, Congress can hire another one. This could go on forever, or eventually it might actually look like obstruction of justice if he just won't let the special counsel go on. And then Congress should raise their own articles of impeachment for a president who keeps going against one of their checks on his power. But that's up to them. Number 7. Disseminating information received from officers of the Department of Justice of the United States to subjects of investigations conducted by lawfully authorized investigative officers, employees of the United States for the purpose of aiding and assisting such subjects in their attempts to avoid criminal liability. Giving people the contents of their investigation before that investigation is concluded or announced, not okay, really. But again, we're getting to the points where these things, we're starting to breach like rules and regulations rather than overt statutes, but still vastly different in character. That's the point of all this. Number 7, Bill Clinton made false and misleading statements to potential witnesses in a federal grand jury proceeding in order to corruptly influence the testimony of those witnesses. They were repeated by the witnesses to the grand jury, causing the grand jury to receive false and misleading information. That's the last Clinton one. Lying to a grand jury, illegal. Inducing people to lie to a grand jury, illegal. Now, importantly, with Clinton, the impeachment failed. So Congress did not find Clinton guilty of all or enough of those to remove him from office. So when I say that he did this, I'm saying that this is what Congress alleges he did. Some people may disagree. We may never know. Doesn't really matter. On July 8th, aboard Air Force One, Trump helped draft a false public statement for his son, Donald Trump Jr. The statement claimed that a 2016 meeting with a Russian lawyer was about adoption policy. Trump Jr. later acknowledged that the meeting was to discuss damaging information the Russian government had about Hillary Clinton. Okay, let me help you out. Presidents lie all the time. All the time. Is it illegal? Probably not. I'm sorry. Like, lying to the public is not a crime. It's just lying to the public. Is it unethical? Yes. Should he do it? No. What this guy's trying to do here is leech on to a charge against Nixon, which I think we're about to see. Yep, here we go. Same number. Making or causing to be made false or misleading public statements for the purpose of deceiving the people of the United States into believing that a thorough and complete investigation had been conducted with respect to allegations of misconduct on the part of personnel of the executive branch of the United States and personnel of the Committee for the Re-election of the President. There was no involvement of such personnel in such misconduct. Okay. Like, is this an actual crime? I don't actually know. Again, making a false statement to the public is a douche move by a president. All of them do it. But is it actually illegal? And that's, again, we're in the realm of impeachment. Impeachment doesn't need illegality necessarily. A breach of the public trust might be grounds for impeachment if Congress agrees. Okay, so this is where we get muddled. This guy's case isn't about a breach of the public trust. He's talking about obstruction of justice. A false public statement cannot obstruct justice. It necessarily cannot, because justice goes on in the background, whether there's a public statement or not. By the way, lots of people make statements about the status of investigations against them. They say, "Oh, this is nonsense. This is bogus. Their investigation has turned up nothing." That's not obstruction of justice. People do this all the time because part of everything is a PR war. So, again, should a president do it? No, probably not. Is it illegal? That's hard to say. On July 26th, in a tweet, Trump called for the firing of Andrew McCabe, the FBI's deputy director, a potential corroborating witness for Comey's conversations with Trump. The tweet was part of Trump's efforts discussed with the White House aides to discredit FBI officials. Okay. By the way, that discrediting FBI officials thing is an opinion about what Trump was doing when dealing with people who were, who are contrary to him. Like, I can't go on about how this isn't illegal because it's just not. It's not illegal for the Trump to call for the firing of Andrew McCabe. Because if the person with hiring authority over him says no, then Trump either says okay, or he fires that person or goes up the chain to fire that person and then works his way down. But it's not illegal to express an opinion over a tweet. I think Andrew McCabe should be fired, even if you're the president. That's not illegal to do. And it wouldn't be illegal for him to fire Andrew McCabe either. Okay. Number 9. The last of the Watergate. I apologize for the amount of yawns. It's a lot later than I wanted to record this. But anyway. Endeavoring to cause prospective defendants and individuals duly tried and convicted to expect favored treatment and consideration in return for their silence or false testimony, or rewarding individuals for their silence or false testimony. Again, inducing people to make false statements under oath is a crime. That's an overtly criminal act. All right. Number 10. Final one for Trump, because you got to have one more than Nixon, right? I'm sure there's nothing in saying that Clinton had 7, Nixon had 9, and I've got 10 against Trump. I'm sure there's nothing to do with that. Throughout, Trump, and this quotation comes from the Nixon article of impeachment, made false or misleading public statements for the purposes of deceiving the people of the United States. Wait, where was that? Your article writer has lied. Because notice what he does here. He puts a period at the end of United States. Why would he do that? It's not in this other article. In the articles against Nixon. Making or causing to be made false or misleading public statements for the purpose of deceiving the people of the United States into believing that a thorough and complete investigation had been conducted with respect to the allegations of misconduct on the part of the personnel of the executive branch. Blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. Making false or misleading public statements for the purpose of deceiving the people of the United States is the business of the President of the United States. Like I said, every single one of them does it. Every single one. Woodrow Wilson maintained adamantly that we weren't going to war, like as the troops were on boats to go help in World War I. Like the idea that a president isn't constantly making false or misleading statements to the public for the purpose of deceiving the people of the United States is nonsensical if we look at it with any sort of objectivity or logic. How long did Barack Obama swear that the economy was recovering in a just fine fashion when we were in one of the longest recoveries following a recession in the history of the United States, if not the longest? Like, and that's fine. Honestly, like, that's okay for Obama to have done that. It's not a criticism. Like, I mean, plenty to criticize Obama on beyond that. But like trying to engender public trust in the system and to reignite the economy through like just getting people to have some confidence in what was going on. Like consumer confidence is a massive part of economic recovery, and trying to spur that through some, well, frankly, white lies. Like, who cares? Every president does this. All of them do this all the time. We have classified documents. They're misleading the public about what's going on with foreign contractors, with military constantly. That's not always nefarious, okay? But here's where he clarifies. Among other things, Trump repeatedly made untruthful statements about American intelligence agencies' conclusions regarding Russia's role in the 2016 election. And you can't see it here, but this untruthful statements is a link to a PolitiFax article on the lie of the year, which is that Russia had nothing to do with the with Trump's election thing. And if you go through it, you'll notice that PolitiFact goes ahead and they take Trump's statement about this thing about Trump and Russia. That's nothing. That's made up. And then they conclude it's lying because they say that Russia interfered with the election. But Trump's statement isn't that Russia didn't interfere with the election. Although he may hold that position, that's not the statement they chose. The statement that they chose is that Trump had something to do with the Russian interference in the election. But they conclude that it's a lie based on Russia interfering with the election, which, by the way, has been alleged. Alleged by lots of people. Alleged. It hasn't actually been proven. But Is it reasonable to conclude that Russia interfered with this election? Yes, and every single other election since 1950. When JFK was inaugurated and made his trip to the United Nations, Khrushchev said, "Welcome, my president. You're welcome for getting elected," or something along that lines. I'm paraphrasing it, because the Russians intentionally interfered to get JFK elected. Did that swing the election? Probably not. Maybe. Who knows? We'll never know. But they interfere with the election. Obviously, we interfere with foreign elections all the time. Ugh. My point is, you can go look at this PolitiFact argument. Trump did not what they're saying is an untruthful statement, and what he's linking to has not been shown to be an untruthful statement. That Trump and Russia colluding to win the election is made up story. That has not been shown false. The fact that he's your political adversary doesn't make it okay to say that a statement that he said is false based on something else potentially being true, and that's that Russia may have interfered with the election. But it's A plus B. Trump colluding with Russia to interfere with the election, and we only have some evidence that Russia interfered with the election. We don't have great evidence that Trump colluded with them at this point. All right, enough of that ranting. Sorry. Obstruction of justice depends on a person's intent. What legal experts often call corrupt intent. This list is so damning because it reveals Trump's intent. It absolutely does not. It absolutely, in a legal sense, does not reveal Trump's intent. You're talking about mens rea, the criminal intent, the malicious mind to do something wrong. And this list does not show an intent to violate law or the rights of other people in a legal way. There is no mens rea in this list of 10 things. So let's see what obstruction of criminal investigations looks like. Like I said, there are other obstruction of justice categories. 18 code or US code chapter 18 or title 18 part 1 chapter 73. If you go there and you go to the 1500s or whatever, it will show you the obstruction of justice charges, or I told you at the beginning of the video how to find this exact link and all of the other obstruction charges. You'll find probably that this is the most relevant, maybe the only relevant one. But let's see what it says. I'll make this a little bigger. Sorry. So you can read it. Whoever willfully endeavors by means of bribery, to obstruct, delay, or prevent the communication of information relating to a violation of any criminal statute of the United States by any person to a criminal investigator shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 5 years, or both. Obstruction of justice under federal law requires bribery as the first part. What's section B? Whoever being an officer of a financial institution, not Trump. B2. Whoever being an officer of a financial institution, not Trump. Number 3, as used in this section, officer of a financial institution means an officer, director, partner, employee, agent, or attorney of or for a financial institution. Okay, C, as used in this section, the term criminal investigator means any individual duly authorized by a department, agency, or armed forces to conduct or engage in investigations of or prosecutions for violations of the criminal laws of the United States. Okay, so up until Part C, these do not apply to Trump. We have no evidence of bribery. Endeavors by means of bribery. That's an important portion of the... That's an element of the crime. You know, it's only directly relevant. So then D. Whoever, acting as or being an officer, director, agent, or employee of a person engaged in the business of insurance, not Trump, is engaged in the business of insurance, not Trump. So finally, E. Whoever having been notified of the applicable disclosure prohibitions or confidentiality requirements of section blah, 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 of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, of the Right to Financial Privacy Act, or the National Security Act, knowingly and with the intent to obstruct an investigation or judicial proceeding, violates such prohibitions or requirements applicable by law to such person shall be imprisoned for not more than 5 years, fined under this title or both. So these are disclosure prohibitions or confidentiality requirements. That means not releasing information. So if Trump were to have released information protected by these acts in an attempt to obstruct justice, that would fall under the purview of violating with a criminal investigation. None of this chapter, nothing in this chapter applies to the actions of the president, even if you take at face value that he did everything that this guy says he did. Obstruction of justice is a real, it's a specific crime with elements. And why haven't they talked about them? Think about why. It's because they don't actually have any evidence that President Trump has obstructed justice. I'm sorry. If he has obstructed justice, impeach him tomorrow. Impeachments are hilarious. Do it. Oh my goodness. I'm sure the Republicans in some way are chomping at the bit to do this. It would be great for them to throw out a corrupt outsider looking to subvert the will of the party and put a good party man like Pence up top. Or impeach Pence and put someone else, like Paul Ryan sidles his way in. I don't know. Maybe this is how Bernie still wins. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If Trump violates the law, impeach him. But stop saying obstruction of justice based on a common understanding of what obstruction of justice is and ignoring the words of the frickin' law. It's ridiculous. I can't get over the incompetence of the media in reporting legal issues. His intent what? To be an insurance salesman and violate the law? Like, what intent? His intent to bribe someone? Who has he bribed? Who has he bribed? Any evidence of a bribe, get him out. But you don't have any. We don't even have allegations of bribes. What obstruction of justice? Under the law. Because if you're talking about a legal standard of obstruction of justice, and that's how you frame this article as a legal obstruction of justice, you don't have it. You got nothing. Just like over and over, they get our hopes up that we're going to have a great public trial of a president, which we don't get very often. Last one was Clinton. Would have been Nixon before that. Before that, we go way back. Way back. This never happens. It's awesome. It's great, by the way, to do this, to refine the rule of law over the president who is not a king. Like, to define where those lines are. Do it. But if you're going to lay it out as a legal framework, you don't have one. Impeachment doesn't have to be legally framed. It has to be loosely framed. But if we're setting this up as Trump is a criminal, be precise. Because I'm sick and tired of people being charged with or accused of criminal actions that aren't criminal acts. That's actual per se defamation. To accuse someone of heinous crimes without them actually being crimes or criminal acts. Okay, sorry. He's inserted himself into details of a criminal investigation in ways that previous presidents rarely, if ever, did. So, they left individual investigations to the Attorney General. So, like, the fact that other presidents didn't do this. Again, we're not grading on a curve, right? The constitutionality of presidential power is not a curved grading system. They either have the authority to do it under the Constitution or they don't. Show me where he doesn't have the authority as the chief law enforcement officer of this country to insert himself into a criminal investigation. Now, should he be investigating himself? No, he should recuse himself. But it's not saying he's investigating himself. It's saying he's firing people, or attempting to fire people in a lot of ways, who are investigating him. Because those people aren't the proper investigative tool. There is a tool to do this, and it's being utilized right now. Nothing they've asserted is outside of the president's power to do so. And he has done so in ways that show he understands he's doing something wrong. That's not a thing, okay? Like, that's your presumptions being projected upon someone. Saying they understand they're doing something wrong is, I mean, that's a massive leap, okay? And this isn't, intent, right, is an element of a lot of criminal activity, but getting to intent requires a substantial showing of evidence beyond any reasonable doubt. There's a lot of reasonable doubt that Trump is merely incompetent as a business professional in dealing with being a public figure who is a duly elected public figure, who has a completely different set of rules than his normal skill set. And again, the wisdom of this election, the qualifications that we put on presidential candidates are outside of the purview of this discussion. You can disagree with Trump's actions all day. I disagree with a lot of Trump's actions. That's fine. That's part of how this country works. But you don't get to accuse the man of a crime. He has cleared the room before trying to influence the investigation. You didn't... influencing the investigation is not firing Comey. Firing Comey or telling Comey to stop. Again, the power of the pardon includes the power of clemency, which includes the ability for the president to direct a law enforcement officer to stop pursuing criminal charges against a person. That is within the purview of the power of the pardon, which is basically unchallengeable. It's a plenary power of the president. It was thoroughly debated at the drafting of the Constitution, and it is not an accident the way it's worded. He directed his son to lie, and he himself has lied. So what? So what? You can lie to the public. Again, presidents do this constantly. When the framers were debating impeachment at the Constitutional Convention, George Mason asked, "Shall any man be above justice?" Look, buddy, you can cherry pick quotes all day. You can cherry pick pieces of the Watergate impeachment articles ending a sentence where it doesn't end to try and fit your narrative all day. That doesn't make you correct. That makes you actually dishonest. Yes, George Mason asked, "Shall any man be above justice?" No, no man shall be above justice. And the president absolutely is not above justice. But when they were debating impeachment at the Constitutional Convention, they said, here's how impeachment works. High crimes and misdemeanors brought before the House, tried before the Senate, Chief Judge presides. There you go. They laid it out. He's not above justice because there's a process to do so. Follow the process. I know you didn't want to get derailed in it, but you're talking about creating a credible case for impeachment. I mean, this is not a credible case for impeachment. This is a very weak case for impeachment. There's no evidence of any crime being broken. So high crimes and misdemeanors, while it is loosely, if at all, defined, does imply that a criminal act has occurred. We don't actually have, at least from your list, any indication that one has occurred. The same question faces us now. No, it doesn't. It absolutely does not. Like, just look at the flipping... And this is petty, but look at the conflation here. Do we not like Trump enough to impeach him? Is that the same question as when framing the foundational documents that will form the government of the next country? Do we determine if there is a king or someone subject to the law? Like, those are vastly different questions. Vastly different. And I'm picking on them because this is the difference between someone who's trained to look at this from a legal perspective and someone who's not. Like, these are basic conflations which defy logic and reason, but they really defy legal reasoning specifically. Trump is unlikely to face impeachment anytime soon. By the way, if Trump was committing overtly criminal acts, he would be likely to face impeachment because the Republicans would have a vested interest in doing so. And the Republicans have not been Trump's friends at all in his administration or in his election. They have a lot of reason to kick him out. Lots of it. They can put a party insider in. They can, ostensibly, they believe their own policies, and they can run roughshod with them over the Democrats through their majorities. And they could go ahead and just straight implement Republican policy and show us the joys of living in a Republican utopia. Why don't they? Because all of the stuff we have against Trump doesn't amount to criminal activity, and it still amounts to a massive political risk for the Republicans at this point. Or perhaps any time at all. Right, he may not ever face impeachment because his actions have not risen to the level to actually merit impeachment. You're defeating your own argument in your conclusion. But it's time for all of us voters, members of Congress, Trump's own staff, to be honest about what he's done. He has obstructed justice. Not under the law, you liar. Take 5 seconds and research the obstruction of justice. Take an hour and research it and do a better job. You don't need to. You don't need to do that much research to find out that he hasn't obstructed justice under the federal statute for the obstruction of justice. And you probably haven't even read it, even though it's literally a page long. It's in outline format. I read it on this video. It takes 5 minutes. Watch this video and you'll immediately be clued in as to why you're incorrect. Anyway, guys, I do this because this is the stuff that gets me just worked up on the average day, and why I try not to delve into the news too much, because this is an utterly incompetent pile of garbage. Should Trump be impeached? Ask Congress if Trump should be impeached. They're the ones who do it. Do we have grounds to impeach Trump? Absolutely. We have grounds to impeach every president ever. All of them. Because all of them push the boundaries of their office in some way or another. Obama was overturned on several executive orders. Was he abusing the powers of his office to warrant impeachment? Sure. If Congress decided he was. Except they didn't. We have lots of evidence that Obama, illegally trafficked arms to cartels in Mexico, or at least his administration did, through the ATF. That's an impeachable offense, folks. But we didn't impeach him for all sorts of reasons, because impeachment ultimately is not a legal outcome. It is a political outcome. It is a political process with political questions, and there's some loose tie to legality because the impeachment section of the Constitution suggests that the president should be impeached on high crimes and misdemeanors. Again, an undefined term, but it lends to the idea that a criminal act should occur. Is a criminal act necessary? I honestly don't believe it is. I don't believe it's necessary to do so because Congress can raise the articles, and if the House charges them and the Senate agrees and the chief judge doesn't throw out the impeachment, although we don't even have a process. We don't even have a process for a chief judge presiding on an impeachment hearing and dismissing for lack of standing. A lack of failure to state a claim, right? There's no remedy that this proceeding can provide because they don't state a claim of actionable relief. I don't even know. No one knows what this would be like. Again, is why it would be interesting. But it's up to Congress. This is a political procedure. So when these dolts keep coming out and calling these legal procedures and legal scholars, a legal scholar's question here is what the constitutional requirements for impeachment are. If you want to ask a legal scholar's notice they don't, if you just get a legal scholar and say, did Trump obstruct justice under a federal statute? That'd be an interesting question to ask a legal scholar who is more scholarly than me. Maybe there's one I don't know about. I'm sure Trump has violated a federal statute. I'm guessing every president violates federal statutes. I have no doubt in my mind that that occurs. But like, is it obstruction of justice? Because that's the framework you set out here. And what you're trying to do, this is a rhetorical tactic for you to set this up as a foregone conclusion by a matter of law, and is only being prevented by a political process of having Republicans in office as opposed to Democrats. That's the improper framing. It's not a foregone conclusion as a matter of law that he should be impeached. It's actually, right now, like, if you're looking at the legality of it, again, the legal ramifications of his actions, should he be impeached based on committing a crime? The crime of obstruction of justice? I don't see evidence for it. Certainly not in these 10 things. But this rhetorical conflation of legality and legal terms, because like reviewing the Constitution is a legal act, but it doesn't have anything to do with criminality. And when you say a legal scholar, like you get a constitutional scholar to talk about the constitutionality of impeachment and the constitutional requirements, and then you put right next to that these crimes, you like make the inference that a legal scholar maybe thinks that these amount to actionable criminal events. This is, again, you're a good writer. You're good at rhetorically bringing people to your conclusion, sort of, but any examination of the claims within this opinion piece shows them to be wholly deficient. Trump's 10 items are vastly different than the Watergate articles and the Clinton impeachment. And then the basic misunderstandings of law, the misquotations or the out of context quotations provided, and then the statement that these are the same questions or the same ideas, like these are blatant misrepresentations of what's happening, and this guy should be ridiculed and mocked for being bad at making an argument. It's a convincing argument for layman's, maybe. Sure, it's certainly a great piece of confirmation bias. Like if you believe Trump should be impeached and you read this and you're like, yeah, like that is confirmation bias. But if you go through an analysis piece by piece, and you, again, it doesn't matter if any of this is true, Congress can impeach him or not. But if you go on the premises laid out in this article, it's internally defeating. It is deficient. When you just start breaking down, again, the claim that these things are comparable to Watergate and the Clinton impeachment, no, not at all. Not at all. Those contain largely overtly criminal acts. This contains very little that is definitely, like nothing that is definitely criminal, and very little that might be potentially criminal. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Because again, I can sit here and complain about this garbage for days, but this is an hour and a half. It's a long video. I hope you enjoyed it. I didn't drink as much whiskey because I was too busy complaining. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Continue checking out the channel. Check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/Lawsplaining. In the video link, there will be links to every flipping social media account on Earth. Anyway, drop me a comment if you have any thoughts or questions about this. Love to interact with you. Let me know if you like these types of videos too, outside of just the lawsuit stuff. And I will, keep making videos. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.